So moving on to Memorial Stadium, we know that you were a part of the demolition effort that took place there, and we wanted to first ask you, what were some of the challenges that came around demolishing a stadium like that?
Being in the neighborhood, being in a residential neighborhood with people so close by, and it was just a beloved place.
In terms of that point that you made of it being beloved, were there any specific moments in like those community meetings that you mentioned, or like anything else where like people didn't want it to be torn down, or people like had like expressed regrets about it?
I mean, originally there was concern about it being torn down, but it prevailed, and it was well documented. The stadium was, and so the memories could be maintained. And there are certain things, I think we salvaged chairs that were sold or given away and things like that, so people had memorabilia.
Along that point, we know that there are certain things at Camden Yards that were taken from Memorial Stadium and put in there, such as the foul poles. What was the process of going through and deciding what pieces of Memorial Stadium you wanted to have in the new stadium, and kind of how were those things divvied up that were given away to people?
Well, I think I don't remember who decided that the foul pole should come over for something, whether it was the Orioles or the architect. But everybody thought it was a great idea. And I think we really left it to the Orioles, who, since they were there as a primary, as to what that happened. But my memory's a little foggy on those details.
Right. So you mentioned when you first came onto the project, do you remember kind of what the initial reaction of the public was to, the undertaking of that project? If people there are a lot of reports online, and in our research we found that, obviously the Colts, before they left, and the Orioles wanted a new stadium because Memorial Stadium didn't have its the proper amenities that a team or its fans were looking for. But you mentioned how hallowed it was. So when the project was first announced, what do you remember kind of what the public reaction was like?
I think it's what I remember. It was mixed. Some people excited about it and for the potential, because back then we didn't know what was going to happen, what was going to be there, and that was always a big concern of the community. Matter of fact, I lived in the area, but so that was one of the bigger things from the community, is, well, what's going to happen in the area? How is that going to affect my property and things like that, and my way of living? And I'm going to miss walking to the ballpark. When I would go to a game, I'd walk. I didn't have to drive because it was just a couple blocks away, which was a lot of fun.
Right. In terms of your own personal reflections, you mentioned that you were excited when the project was first announced, but when you're looking back on it, more than 3 decades after its opening now, what does it kind of mean to you personally, knowing that each time that you look at that stadium, you get to say, I had a piece in creating that, especially since it's become such a hallowed place, not just for baseball, but architecture and now stadium design in general?
The best one, we broke the mold. I wouldn't forget, I'd travel for business elsewhere, and I'd hear somebody talking about Oriole Park, and I would have to refrain myself from jumping over to say, hey, I was on part of that project, But people are still amazed when you say that you are, so it's a great feeling.
How did your role on the project impact the rest of your career?
I think that's really when I started knowing what I wanted to do, and I learned a lot, but I also gave a lot, and I think that's just started making my career, as opposed to jumping from other little projects beforehand. And it's basically, once finishing that, it's I'd pretty much write my own ticket anywhere.
You mentioned that William Donald Schaefer brought you along for the project, and you just kind of said figuring out what you wanted to do. Was it during this project that you kind of you felt you really loved doing this, you had a passion for it, and you wanted to continue doing that, as opposed to the work you had been doing in the mayor's office previously?
Well, before I got here, I was working on other construction projects. I was in Pittsburgh and New York working on different ones. But this one just spoke to me, just because of the impactfulness, and as opposed to just putting up an office building or working on rail systems. This was very impactful to a city, not just a neighborhood, but a city in the States. And that's was part of the excitement about it.
Is there a particular moment or story, whether it be during the creation of the project, right after, or since then, that like really, that you find yourself revisiting, or something that really like captures the essence of your experience?
I should probably say opening day. When after the third inning, when I sat down, I passed out and slept through 3 innings.
Really?
But I think because that was the first time I think I had sat down in a week. But other things during the design, something that besides how I had to change the way of dealing with the communities, and I've carried that on through the years, is how I dealt with the disabled and the able community, whereas I was working with the director of the office back then of individuals with disabilities for the states. And we had worked out a lot of things, and we were going to take the product around the state to talk to different communities. And when we got there, we had boards and so what we were going to do, and this is what we had designed a chair that moved out of the way and things like that, and thinking, oh, we had everything under control. Man, when they laid one into us, I had the hardest time keeping my composure together to get through that meeting. To understand is that they were more upset that we didn't have them in at the very early stages, that we had waited till we had gotten so much done to be able to have an effect on the building, even though we knew we had certain criteria that we had to meet throughout the process. So they felt very neglected by the project, and that was very hurtful. It hurt hearing that, because I thought we were doing good and dealing with the people that we had been, but it opened my eyes and made me realize that that wasn't it, and I wasn't anything, and I need to learn to listen more and get out there and be out in front to do things. So we should try to do that as much as possible moving forward.
When it comes to opening day, in our research and the interviews we've conducted, people have kind of expressed like mixed feelings about what they were feeling that day. Some, it was a stressful experience. Some, it was like an amazing experience. For you, I know that they had hosted like some exhibition games there before like opening day, but like that was really like the culmination of it. Prior to falling asleep because you were so tired from working on it, what were you kind of feeling in that moment of like? Was it like
all of the above. Another fun thing was the Orioles allowed some of the workers to participate in the opening ceremony. So it was 50 workers, and they each get 2 tickets, and I got to select the workers. So I was figuring out, well, how do I do that and be fair? And I didn't want to just open up to a lottery thing, and I didn't want to just give certain numbers to different people because I know they would not get them out. So I literally handpicked all 50 people and swore them to secrecy, because they had to hold on to the secret for 6 weeks. And I had laborers, I had supervisors, I had all the different trades there, so different people could experience that they would never experience before. And the look on their faces when I asked them, they were able to bring either their dads or their son or something. They were just so excited about being able to participate in something like that they would never be able to do again. So for me, that was really an emotional time when they all got called out there and then were holding the ribbon to cut open the ceremony. It was one of my highlights of that day.
One of the men that we interviewed, David Ashton, he mentioned that like after the project was finished and people came into the ballpark, he felt like it was so weird seeing like the stadium filled with people.
It was upsetting a little bit too.
Yeah.
It's like the first time I saw a graffiti mark on in the bathroom, I was just about having coronary at that point. It's like, how could you do that? I gave you all my blood, sweat, and tears, and you've defiled it. I said, this is not right. I still get like that.
Outside of moments like that, I'm sure that you know, there were a lot of people that were happy to be there, happy to be a part of that. And you mentioned earlier, just like, you know, you wanted to build something in Baltimore that like really captured the essence of that city. Were there other specific like happy remarks that you overheard when you were there, or just like faces you remember seeing that kind of like stuck with you?
I mean, it was just seeing everybody's happy faces. You know, they don't know all the blood, sweat, and tears that went in, and all the mishaps and the corrections and things that we had to do in order to make sure it was done on time. And that was the big thing. There were a lot of penalties if we did not open on time. So,
going back, do you happen to know how many times you have revisited it at all?
well, I continued to work at the Stadium Authority for about 10 years afterwards. So I was there all the time because the office was in the ballpark. So it was great just going around and looking at things, renovations and just operational changes. But life was busy. I was off somewhere else doing something. I mean, it was fun working across the street at the convention center because I just ran across the street. But it always gives me pride and joy when I drive by.
Whether it was in your time working for the Stadium Authority or since then, when you look at the ballpark, whether on the inside or the outside, obviously working on it, you have a different lens than most people would see it through. Is there a specific thing about the ballpark that you think that like you can see that and really appreciate that the average fan might not?
No, probably I know where some of the little. No, I wouldn't say so. Not at this point. It's just been a while.
That's all we have.